So we're gonna start with a demo on how to use Photopea, bringing in the photograph of your print, editing it, manipulating it, and then adding your text. So we're gonna start by bringing in the photo of our monotype. So I'm just gonna drag it right into this window. I'm at photopea.com. And I like to work in full screen. It just gives me a little bit more real estate. You do have these ads on the right-hand side, which you can pay to get rid of, but they're not too obtrusive. If you've ever used Photoshop, a lot of the tools and even the keyboard shortcuts are the same. So you have your toolbar over here on the left, and you have your panels like your layer panel over here on the right, and then all your menu items up here and your like tool adjustments up here. I can even do things like Command minus to zoom out, Command plus to zoom in, Command 0, I'm on a Mac, to fill the screen. So here is the monotype print. And the first thing I want to do is make the photo look as good as I can. So if it needs to be brightened or adjusted or cropped, I'm going to do that first. So my crop tool is over here. I'm happy with it. I might, crop a little bit if I want to get rid of that extra white space, and then just press return. And then I'm going to start by making some adjustments. And the way Photopea and the way Photoshop works is it works in layers. So over here is my background, my original, which I don't really want to touch. So that way, if I do anything wrong, I can always get back to the original. So I'm going to click on this little black and white, I call it the black and white cookie. It's the layer adjustment. And you can see if you hover over any tool, it'll give you the title. So I'm going to click on that, and here's a bunch of things that I can adjust. I usually start at the top with brightness and contrast and kind of work my way down if I need to. So, and unfortunately, you can't really move that. But I'm going to just brighten it just a little bit, just to get that white paper back to white. I have to be careful that I don't lose detail. So if I go to 0, I'm just going to brighten it just a little bit. I can also bump up the contrast a bit. It's also going to get the paper back to white and just make my colors a little punchier. And then I can click the little properties button to minimize that panel. So that looks pretty good. And the nice thing, because I'm working in layers, I can click the little eyeball, see it before and after. I can just delete that layer if I want, drag it to the trash. So I'm going to go back to my background now, another layer adjustment. Levels, curves, and exposure are also all going to adjust the brightness, contrast, exposure of it. I think brightness and contrast does fine. I'm going to go down here to vibrance. So that's going to deal with my colors. And you can see how vibrant or intense, and then saturation is kind of the purity, the intensity of the colors. And you can make a decision, do you want them to look unnaturally saturated? Do you want them to look, as realistic to your eye? And so you may just be adjusting things that the camera didn't capture. So I'm going to make them a little bit more vibrant, might make them a little more saturated. Obviously, if you go and desaturate them, now you have a black and white image. So I think just a little bit more and minimize that. So again, before, after. And so these are things that you might do to any photograph, not just artwork, but any photograph to make it look better. I'm going to go back to my background, and then color balance and hue and saturation are going to allow me to affect individual colors. Let's actually start with hue saturation. So this is going to also saturate my colors and adjust the hue. And I can now affect individual colors. So if I wanted to change the hue, so that's changing the color, I can make it really wacky, right? Obviously, that's going to change my intent if colors don't look the way I intended them to. But let's say I want to affect the blue. And maybe I want that blue more saturated, or maybe I want the blue a little less saturated. Maybe I want that magenta, so that's like the purple, the red and the purple. Maybe I want it to be a little more blue and more purple or more red. That even gets into brown, and obviously I'm gonna invert those into green. So you can tweak things, if you wanted the colors to be more on one end or the other, you can affect that way. So I'm actually not going to use that, so I'm just going to delete that. So I'm pretty happy with this, the way it looks. Now is when we can start to really manipulate things. So this is where, let's say I made a different monotype. I could bring that in and overlay it or use parts of it. So maybe I made multiple versions. I tried my different thumbnail sketches and I made more than one print. Or if I'm happy with this print, but I want to use parts of it in other areas, I could do that as well. So I'm going to actually take my background and I'm going to drag it to this little button, the new layer icon. So I'm going to click background, drop it there. And so now I've duplicated that layer. And if I go over here to my toolbar and hover over that, it's the move tool. And so now I have more than one background. And I can lower the opacity of that layer so you can actually see through it. And so I could do something like that if I wanted to. It kind of hides the other one. I can also change how these layers interact with each other. Typically, the way the layers work in normal mode is they're just going to be like sheets of paper, one on top of the other. Any adjustment layer that I have is going to affect all the layers below it. So this one and this one are affecting both of these. I can rearrange them, so I could put this layer above those. So now it's not being affected by that brightness and contrast and vibrance layer. So you can see how different. This was my original photo. This is my adjusted photo. I'll put that back there. But I can also change how it just interacts with this layer. So instead of it being a normal interaction, I can choose overlay. And what it does is it creates almost like a double exposure where certain areas are more transparent than others. And so I can just experiment with these different interactions. And some will do something, some might do very little. It depends on the colors. I really like the way overlay looks. It almost erases out the white, which is a nice technique instead of having to delete the white. Color burn, and some of them can get pretty trippy. Darker color is kind of nice, does something very similar. You can do difference, so it's going to actually invert wherever the colors are opposite if you want to get really psychedelic. Exclusion is kind of fun. But I think I liked the way darken looked. Now, you could just do this of two images that are separate stacked on top of each other, but I'm actually going to position this like here. And then I'm going to adjust the size so that it's not the exact same size. And to adjust the size of a layer, I'm going to go up here to edit. And I can do transform where I rotate that layer. I can also choose free transform, and here's the keyboard shortcut. And what it does is it gives me these little handlebars, and I'm going to hold shift as I drag. If I don't hold shift, what can happen is it gets squeezed, which you might like. I don't particularly like the way that looks, especially if you have a photograph that you don't want. So I'm going to free transform, hold shift. I'm just going to drag that smaller. And so I kind of like the way it looks like a second flower. And then I'm going to rotate it. So if I bring my cursor to the outside, I can rotate. Let's see. I think I'm going to put this one over here. Yeah, like right there, I think. And then I'm actually going to so I then press return to set that. I'm going to make another copy of this. new layer icon, move tool, drag it over, edit, free transform, rotate it, and I think I'm going to put it right there. I'm trying to, maybe this little white area right here I kind of like, and then press return. I can zoom in and out. You do have to be on the move tool. Sometimes the command plus and minus gets confused, but if I just click, it fixes it. Now, I can see it's getting a little crowded because I've got a lot of other stuff besides just that little bud. So I can get rid of that in a couple different ways. I could just, I'm going to just hide this top layer. So we're just looking at this one over here, this one. I could just erase it, but that's going to be a permanent change, and it gives me a little less control. So what I'm actually going to do is click on the layer, and then over here on the right, I've got the layer mask. They call it a raster mask in Photopea. Photoshop calls it a layer mask. So I'm going to click on that. And what it does is it creates this extra little box that's now highlighted. Here the layer is highlighted. Here the raster mask is highlighted. And what that's going to allow me to do is if I go over here and choose my brush, and I press D for default, so that way my colors are white and black. And I'm going to switch this so black is on top. I can also press X and it switches them. And what I'm going to do is adjust my brush size. I can also press the left bracket and the right bracket to change it. And I'm going to lower the hardness. So that's how sharp of an edge that brush has. And now, as long as I'm on that background, I'm going to make sure my opacity is at 100. So you can see, and I can even do this. I can turn off the background layer. And what I'm going to do is it just paints away anything that I don't want. And if I mess up, whoops, just press X, switches back to white, and I can paint it back in. So you can see now it's just that. And then again, I can paint back in certain things. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this layer back on and do the same thing. Raster mask, paint, black paintbrush. I'm going to turn off these other layers just so I can see it. I'm going to use my right bracket, make that brush nice and big. Oh, you can see the edge of my brush now is kind of hard. So I'm going to bring that down. But still, there we go. Why is that looking the way it does? Every once in a while. That's why, because I switched to the pencil tool and not the brush tool. So my brush was not nice and soft. There we go. Sometimes that happens. So now I get a nice soft painting away, and I can bring those layers back. Now, you may say like, oh, that's too much. I don't really like the way that looks. Or I can click back on the layer, click on my move tool, and I can move it around. I can free transform it, rotate it. Oh, maybe I like it something, maybe I like it more like that. All right. So again, I kind of like it right somewhere in there. And actually, I'm liking this white spot. Or I could do something, like if I don't like the way this print, maybe I didn't have enough pressure in that one spot. I could kind of adjust that. So I could actually Whoops, a little too far. Sometimes it gets a little. So I could actually kind of fix that by duplicating and using that layer there. And so maybe I actually like that better. And then what I'm going to do now is make sure I click on that raster mask, click back on my paintbrush, and I'm just going to paint away this piece that I didn't want. Yeah. So I like that. Now, what I could even do now is do the same thing for that other piece. So I could take this background copy, duplicate it, move tool, and put it over that if I wanted to. Yeah, so if I wanted that to be a little bit more intense, and now I'm feeling like I almost do want that down there. You know, you could keep going. You could just keep adding something like, kind of like that. I'm gonna rotate it just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Press return. Okay. It's not a bad idea to save as I am going because this is just in your browser. One thing that I suggest you do is have restarted your browser, not have anything else open in that browser. That way it runs as smoothly as it can. I can do a few things. I can export this as a JPEG, which will basically flatten it. It'll get rid of all of these layers. So if I try that, it'll ask me what quality. I always want to be 100%. And then when I click save, it's just going to save it down here to my downloads folder. But when I open that, it's just a JPEG. It's just a flat image. There's no layers, which is still good, but I can't go back and tweak these things or remove a certain layer. So if I want to be able to come back to this and adjust it, or I'm just making sure I'm saving along the way, I'm going to click Save as PSD, which stands for Photoshop document or Photopea document. You could then open that in Photoshop if you actually had it. Now, the difference here, if I look at these, is this one is 131 megabytes, where the flattened JPEG is only 11. So that does take up quite a bit more space, so you do have to be conscious of that. You don't want to save multiple versions of this, you know, but it's not a bad idea to save at kind of a crucial point. To add our text. So we're going to start by just using the fonts that are in Photopea, and then I'll do another, show you how to import fonts if you'd like to. So I'm going to go over here to my text tool, and I can just click and start typing. I can also draw a box to contain my text if I want. So I want to think about where I might put it. I could put it in this white space up here. I could put it down here in this darker area. And so you could think about, do you have an area in your print that is a large one color or kind of one level of contrast value, because you're going to want to make that text stand out. And there's a couple of things that we can do to make the text stand out if you have a lot of texture and you don't have large open areas. So let's start by thinking about this little space here. So I'm going to just draw a little box. I can always change that later. The mantra that Miss Smith has used is I control this journey. So right now it's whatever the default text and type is. I can just make that black, and then I can, so I've selected that text. So I'm still in the text tool. I've selected that text. I can adjust the size. And if the size maxes out, there's other things that you can do to adjust the size. And then here I can pick from any of these typefaces, and they give you a little preview. It's not the best preview. You really have to kind of click on it, select it to see what you want to use. And it can feel very overwhelming. Some of these are kind of standard fonts that you might be familiar with, and others are more decorative fonts. So you have to choose. And thinking about what typeface goes with your mantra. Something like this typeface, I'm going to have to click on my move tool to be able to then move that box. That feels very kind of industrial or rugged. I can also go to Edit, Free Transform, remember, hold Shift, and drag that bigger to make that typeface larger. Now, that stands out, I can see it, but it doesn't go well with the kind of delicate, flowery shapes that you see in the background. And so that isn't really best suited for what I'm going to do. So I'm going to click back on my text tool, double click or highlight the text, and try a different typeface. So I think something that might look more decorative, maybe handwritten would be nice. That's like a little too funky. So you could spend forever searching through hundreds and hundreds of typefaces as well as downloading typefaces. I kind of like that. I might then choose to capitalize the I, or yeah, I kind of like that. It kind of looks sort of hand painted, hand drawn. And so I could just do something like that. I think that stands out well enough. I can play around with the positioning. I can also click on my text tool, highlight it again, and I can center it. I can right justify it. Depending on, maybe it's in the bottom right corner. Click on my move tool, see what that looks like. Or I'm going to put it up here. Left justify it. I can put control on its own line. I think the I looks too small. I could see again what a lowercase one. I think that's kind of weird. I could see what just the letter L. I could get away with just using an L for the I. Don't really like that. I think that looks fine. Now, I can leave it in black. I can, again, text tool, which is the letter T, select my text, and I can pick a color. So instead of black, I can select maybe this dark blue. Click OK. Oh, it's kind of nice. You have to kind of move it around, see where it doesn't blend in. And then I might adjust it. So I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform, holding Shift. Let's see if I can get it to fit in this little box. I may have to oh, look at that, look at that. Oh, look at that. Now, the other thing that I can do, if I want to be able to move these around even more, is I can make them separate text boxes. So I can take this, copy that layer, and let's just get rid of this part. Click on my move tool, put that there. T for text, select those two words. Make sure, click back on my move tool. Whoops, back on my move tool. Uh-oh, something got deleted. This journey. There we go. And then now I can edit, free transform, hold shift, remember. I can make it different sizes. So maybe journey fits there. you know, or I can also just adjust the size here. Maybe this is a little smaller, and Journey. No, see, I can't make Journey any bigger just using that. Yeah, see, and as long as it's legible. Oops. Oops, oops. Yeah. And, you know, I might get to the point where like, oh no, I really need it to all be separate layers. Oops. Got too tiny. There we go. So there's nothing to say that all of the text has to be the same. You know, I kind of like how that's hidden in there. Another way that I could make that stand out, I'm just going to hide these layers, is let's say I just want it across the bottom. I control this journey. Is I can make a box. So I'm going to create a new layer. It's going to be under that piece of text. And I'm going to choose my marquee tool, and I'm just going to draw, let's just draw a box like this. And I'm going to pick a color. And let's say I'm going to pick that same kind of purpley color like that. And then I'm going to go to my paint bucket, and I'm just going to click. And what it's doing is it's painting in that box that I drew. Then I can click back on the little marquee tool to get rid of it, or the rectangle select tool, and then my move tool. And what I can do now is I've got this box, and I can do a couple things. I can lower the opacity of that box. You know, it doesn't, so I have it a little bit of a show through. The reason I made it bigger is to try something else. I can create that raster mask again, and then press D for default, switch it to black. Paintbrush, remember? I've got lowered hardness. I'm gonna lower my opacity, so that's the brush doesn't paint it away completely. And I'm gonna make it nice and big. And what I'm gonna do is just sort of feather that edge. Feather this edge. And then I'm gonna make my brush small and just erase that hard edge there. And I might even go back and make the opacity of that stronger. Yeah, so there's this nice flow. I control this journey. It kind of flows up to those petals. So those are, you know, a few different options, whether you like it up there or I like it down there. And the nice thing is, what I can do is I can turn these two layers off. I go to File, Export as JPEG. And because those layers are turned off, they will not show up in that JPEG. And then I can turn those layers back on and turn the other ones off. Make sure I turned them all off. File, Export as, JPEG, Save. And there we go. So now, and they do name them all the same thing, so you do have to be careful. It just adds a number to the end of them. So there was this one, there was this one, there was my earlier saves. Okay. Show you how to load your own font that you selected somewhere else into Photopea. So I like dafont.com because it has a lot of free fonts. That has a pretty good interface. And so the other thing that's really nice is you can type in what you want it to say and then find those. So they're also categorized really nicely. So if I want something that's calligraphy, so it looks like it's handwritten, you could also handwrite if you want. I can also, let's see, what's another good one? Handwritten specifically. And then I can think about, like, all right, let's just try this one. So what I can do, I control this journey. And then you can see it. You can, now, any of these will show the text that I want to use. Ooh, I like this kind of like brushy one. I download that. So you will need to be on a device where you can download that font. Then I'm going to open it. And so the TTF is the text file. A lot of these, because they are free, do say that you can't use them for commercial purposes. So I can't design a logo for a brand where I'm making money off of it. But for our purposes, that is fine. So then I'm going to go to my type tool up here, and I'm going to choose load font. And so now I'm going to go to my downloads folder, and here's breathing, and here is the text file, and I'm going to open that, and then say okay. Now, because I don't have an account with Photopea, if you log out or if you leave the site and it hasn't saved your session, you would have to load the font again. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. So now it should sometimes I have to click all. So I'm going to make sure it loads all of my fonts, not just the default ones. And let's see. Let's see, maybe switch tools, text tool, click again. Let's search for it. Oh, there it is. So I don't know why it doesn't show up in the list, but when I search for it, there it is. So I control this journey. So that seems to be the trick. And then I'm gonna edit transform, hold shift. And let's say maybe I wanna put this all the way across the bottom. Let's do that. And I need to then make my little box a little bit bigger. So I'm also going to go to Edit, Free Transform, and make that pink box bigger. And actually, let's do this. This is why we don't want to use the eraser tool. Instead, we want to use that raster mask. So I'm going to press return. I'm going to click on that raster mask. And now if I paint brush in white, it puts that edge back. So I can move, make it a little bigger. There we go. And then I can go back to the raster mask, paint brush in black. Whoopsie, see how it painted actual black because I'm not on my mask. Oops. There we go. Nice. I like that. And maybe I want a little more. And I can also click back on here. I'm going to stretch this. Click back on my mask. And this is just like fine tuning. I'll lower that opacity of my brush so it paints it away a little bit more. Whoopsie. Back on black. Oh, and that's why I'm in my pencil, not my brush. I made that mistake earlier. Gotta fix that. There we go. Yeah. And this one I might lower the opacity a little bit. It shows up enough. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that one. So again, file, export as JPEG, high quality, and save. There we are.